There's a chill in the air, but spring training draws near. That means it's time for Big Brain MLB statistical projections. And we have one of those big brains as our special guest. Please strap yourselves in and get locked on Twins.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Locked On Twins, your daily go-to destination for the top Minnesota Twins insight, discourse, and analysis. Personally, it's my favorite of the Locked On Podcast Network, which, by the way, brings you your team every day. I'm co-host Dave Brown, a professional ball writer since 1998, a BBWA member since 2012, and a Baseball Hall of Fame voter for the second straight year. Please follow me on Twitter at AnswerDaveBrown. See, it says there in the whatever. You can also find me on Blue Sky. I'm just Answer Dave on Blue Sky. So across cyberspace, we have Brandon Warren, a Twins watcher for 30 years, who not long ago covered the team on a daily basis professionally. He asks that you submit your Minnesota Vikings playoff takes to him at Brandon_Warren on Twitter and on Blue Sky simply by shouting Warren into your computer. Say something, Brandon, first of all.
Good evening, sports fans. How are we doing? No, it reminds me the other day, it was my mom's birthday, and we said to our son, say hi, CJ. And he goes, hi, CJ. You know, like that old gag from cartoons and 80s and 90s sitcoms. So, yes, I'll say a little something into the camera. Yeah, anything's going to be better than talking about the Vikings. And I'm a big fan of Mr. Szymborski, so I'm excited.
Well, we'll test that theory. And on this podcast, Brandon alluded to it. We've got something special for you, a third person. It's not Theo Tollefson again. It's a different person.
Hulk Hogan. It's not Hulk Hogan either.
That's true. It's Dan Szymborski. We've got another person. Our special guest is what I like to call a good get. He's Dan Szymborski, who writes for Fangraphs, ESPN, for himself and the world. He is the creator and developer of the ZiPS projections, which you can find at Fangraphs. And today, they have published the results for the Minnesota Twins. How exciting is that? Dan, say hi.
Hey, guys. How's it going? Hey. I wanted to do a Hulk Hogan imitation, but then I remembered that I don't have impersonation skills.
Let me tell you, brother, the Twins are going to win 85 to 88 games this year.
That's pretty good, Brandon. You do.
And not saying anything racist, because Hulk Hogan's kind of been outed as not very nice.
That's true.
Yeah, but at least I have my pants on.
Hey.
Let's keep it. Although we don't know for sure, because right now you're just your head. We don't have video for Dan, so we've got a different format, and he's got somebody broke in and broke his camera. I don't know. So it's not important. It's the information and the camaraderie. So, and we can do that without video. It's fine. Hey, Brandon, before we talk to Dan about ZiPS and the Twins and what life is like for Dan, can you tell us? Is anybody bringing us this show specifically?
Yeah, from the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, if you're a new customer, you can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Boy, that $300, that's big time.
That's a good amount of money. And so Locked On Twins today, we're talking to Dan Szymborski, who created and developed the ZiPS projections, and they're pretty much every day, more or less, he's coming out with a new team. Since November, I think they started to publish, what we think the Dodgers will do this year, the Angels or whatever. And now we are down to the Minnesota Twins on Tuesday, January 14th. It's Dan, ZiPS is 20 years old as far as the public face of it. You started developing it a little longer ago than that, but 2005 was the first year that the likes of me and Brandon could see what you had in store for Major League ball players. Can you tell us what is special about this particular vintage of ZiPS?
Well, I hate the thing special because that makes it sound like I have some magic secret. One of the fact is making a good projection system is really just a lot of work and sweat rather than actual inspiration, we should say. ZiPS got its start in the 90s, really, from conversations with Chris Dial, who people around Saber might know. He tends to know most of the stat people, even though he never really got super involved, other than working with Rawlings for the Gold Glove Awards when he was on the Sabres board. So we used to talk about doing a projection system. We never did. I kind of got back to it in 2002 after Vorsh McCracken had done his work with Dips and some of his data on fielding independent, just the whole theory, the unified field theory of independent fielding and pictures. So I wanted to make something that kind of incorporated those beliefs. That it seemed kind of stupid to just do pictures and not do hitters. And one thing led to another. I never really envisioned it being useful from the start. It was more of a fun experiment because I don't know, I guess I was bored at the time. And over time, it became useful and it became more useful and data became better because this was still a time where Baseball Reference didn't even update every day. There was just the day at the end of the season where the stats were updated. That's just how far baseball has come from a data standpoint the last 20 years. So as time goes on, it got more and more complex. I incorporated more things. I guess that's the benefit of majoring in math in college, that I did remember quite a lot of the stuff I needed to do. A lot of stuff I didn't remember for various reasons, some alcohol related, some less legal related, let's just say, but not super, like, let's just say stuff that's legal now in many states. There was quite a bit of that in my 20s. And I guess one thing led to another. The work turned out to be useful. And eventually people wanted to give me money for the work. Which is always a nice thing. And here I am. Of course, now that ZiPS has been around for 2 decades, it gets harder and harder to hide that I'm an aging Gen Xer. I can't say I like that drip you got. I can't throw out terminology and try to trick the youths. I've become Steve Buscemi in Arrested Development.
Yes. Fellow kids.
Yeah. ZiPS is nearly old enough to drink, which I suspect you'd probably need if you're a White Sox fan looking at those predictions. How do the Twins compare to the rest of the division? Because I've made the assertion, and I've even seen people say they're not going to listen to the show anymore because I'm being ridiculous, that I think this is as talented a team in the division as any other. And if they can get their 3 big guys on offense, even marginally healthy relative to how they've been in recent years, there's no reason this team can't be there right at the end in the division hunt.
They get a very strong projection. I mean, not Dodgers strong or anything. Let's not be too crazy. There are some real weaknesses with the team, and really weaknesses with every team in the AL Central, some more than others. But ZiPS, depending on how the rest of the winter shakes out, assumptions on playing time, health, kind of has the Twins kind of in that 85 to 89 win range. The Guardians ZiPS haven't gone up, and they're kind of in the same bucket, so to speak, with the Tigers and the Royals a bit behind that. So it should be a good race, but I wouldn't be panicking by any sense about where the Twins are, because there is a lot to like about the team. And of course, some things that you wish that they would improve on, some things you wish they were more aggressive about, but there's also going to be realities of how much they're willing to spend at the end of the day. So I would it's much better. I mean, you can always root for the White Sox, and
but in short, the Doomers are definitely taking it a bit too far with where this team is right now at this moment in time.
I think that's the case, and you can also kind of understand it in a way, because just the way that, I mean, even ignoring anything that any team has done, the fact is 2024 did not end that long ago. We're just a few months from the end of the season, and this was a team that was in a pretty good position on September 1st, and then kind of tread water for the next month. I think they went like 9-18, something like that,
right.
And fell out of the race as the Tigers and the Royals surged, finished 4th in the division. So obviously it feels bad, and it's one of those things that's it's hard to sometimes tell people, like, you know, it feels really, really bad, but it really isn't that bad. I kind of had to tell Yankees fans that last year, Cardinals fans, Mets fans, because I had the same kind of feelings that even if you project that they're going to do better, that 2023 season felt really, really bad for those teams. And at that point, like the mean old stat guys saying, ignore your lying eyes. But I am a stat guy. I do work with numbers, and I think the Twins are in a decent place.
Dan, can you, what are the things that you want to get out there about what ZiPS does, what it can do, what it doesn't do, kind of to dispel some, misnomers about what it is? One of the things you wrote, with ZiPS, my job isn't getting the right answer, it's getting the correct number of right, wrong, and extremely wrong answers. Could you flesh that out a little bit more? What do you mean?
A cynic might say that Dan's just hedging his bets. But the reality is the future is really uncertain, and there's no matter how much knowledge you have, you are going to be wrong quite a bit. An example I like to use is, imagine that you knew that every game going into the season, you knew that it was like every game was a coin flip. Every team was a 500 team. Naturally, if you knew that for a fact, you'd project every team to go 81-81. But the fact is you'd still miss by 7 or 8 games on 20% of the league. And that's pretty big with perfect knowledge. Even if you knew the probability of every game just in a normal season going into it, you would still miss by an average of like 6.1 wins per team. That's just how wide the range of the future is. And that's a massive range, because six more wins or 6 fewer wins, that's a pretty big swing. And the fact is, when you do a projection, you kind of know going in that you are going to be wrong. And you know it more acutely, I think, than even the people who are very mad at you about things, because, no matter how well you're going to do, you expect to be wrong a certain percentage of the time. I keep in my Twitter profile the percentage probabilities for individual players from the year before, so I can show how the review worked. I mean, you need 10% of players to hit that 90th percentile projection. You need 20% of the players to hit that 80th percentile projection, and so on and so forth. So it's not necessarily knowing the one projection, even if it's that middle number. It's kind of knowing the array of outcomes that are possible. That's kind of just how you project and how you model risk when you're a team or anything. A fantasy player, there's a lot of uses for that kind of thing.
We are talking with Dan Szymborski, the creator and developer of ZiPS. And after this commercial break, we'll talk to him more about 2025 with ZiPS and the Twins and the AL Central and all kinds of fun stuff.
From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. If you're like Dave and me, your team is no longer in the playoffs. I don't know about Dan if he's I know he's East Coast, maybe a Ravens fan. We'll have to ask him about that. But visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
We're talking with Dan Szymborski of Fangraphs and ESPN, and the creator and developer of ZiPS projections. And the Twins, you have them as being strong in the places where fans probably think they would be. The bullpen, starting rotation, some of the star players, and maybe some of the supporting players being a little bit questionable, and maybe there being some room for improvement there by the team. Is that a fair characterization of what you see for them this season?
I think that's quite fair. Carlos Correa, thankfully, he had a terrific season in part, at least, because there was a weird thing like he's toasting Minnesota. I don't necessarily know if it was a local thing or just crazy people nationally riding him, but he's fine. Byron Buxton, when he's healthy, is fine. It was nice to see him in the outfield again. Royce Lewis, there's also health concerns, obviously, and I think he'll be fine too. I think that's a fair characterization because while you look at a lot of the projections and they're underwhelming, they're not abysmal. There are no real places where you have the WAR projected as 0 point something or the dreaded negative that I had to bring out for the White Sox already. It's there are legitimate major league players at every position. Now, some of them are below average. Some of the situations you feel that maybe they could improve on this, but again, I don't think there's anything that you need to, start flipping over tables in anger about, which is a thing because that leaves a real mess.
Very biblical of someone to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. One player who I like better than ZiPS seems to like is Brooks Lee. Why doesn't he seem to measure up? Is it just a matter of not enough? He didn't have a lot of success in the major leagues last year. Is that basically what we're seeing here? The algorithm, or it wants to have him prove things to it. Is that fair?
I think, well, what it comes down to on one level is that he obviously played better in the minors, not quite as great as the raw stats look, because people sometimes forget that offense has been up tremendously in most of the minor leagues. That's changed as they've kind of tinkered with some rules, but offense in the minors is kind of crazy right now. And even if it was a small, limited sample size, he did not hit well in the majors in 2024. And even though ZiPS isn't just looking at last season and weighing multiple years, he doesn't have the longest resume to really rely on, the same way you could rely on a Carlos Correa off here. I mean, he was a 2022 draftee, so he doesn't have a lot of professional time. I think that there's certainly some upside there, but ZiPS is going to be a little standoffish, we'll say, until it sees more at the major league level. I think just really that line in the majors was a pretty big drag, especially because there wasn't an obvious statistical indicator that suggested that maybe that was misleading in the short term. It wasn't like he had peripheral numbers that suggested something better. His hard hit percentage wasn't exactly good in the majors. So ZiPS is a little worried about that, and it's kind of just taking it conservatively, because history says that even for talented young players, people do sometimes overrate the probability of a given player improving. It's just one of those things. It's not neat curves where every 22-year-old is going to get better at 23, 24, 25, get their peak season at 26, 27, then decline from there. It's not that neat. And a lot of players that don't succeed in the majors weren't necessarily that they were bad. It's just that they never improved. They never really peaked. I think that if you actually look at peak age, where players peak in baseball, and you used minor leaguers in it, you would actually find that players kind of sometimes peak even earlier than that. The people who make the majors are the ones who actually have a peak, and that's not everyone. And that's why a lot of first rounders fail. It's not because they weren't great players coming out of high school or college. It's that they never improved from where they were when they were drafted or signed.
I think one of my least favorite logical fallacies is a player is young and only going to get better. And that one you see all the time on Twitter. So I think that's why the nonlinear development curve that people don't seem to understand always kind of sticks with me, and I'm sure with the projections as well. Offensively, 12 players projected at 300 plus plate appearances and awaited runs, an OPS plus over 100. Then you got Peyton Eels, who I want to talk about, at 99. So to me, you can, talk me out of this, talk me into this. That to me is the foundation of a pretty dang good offense. If you've got all those, now there are some guys who will not be in the offense, but are projected better, but including Alex Kirilloff, who's retired. But there is enough of a foundation here where I feel, again, pretty good about this offense going toe to toe with the rest of the division. And I think 12 guys at 100 or better. And, I know the sample sizes are what they are because of how the projection system works. But if those guys are considered even semi-regular players, that's a huge feather in their cap.
Yeah, they do have a lot of the elements of a good offense when we talk about these guys. I think the problem isn't necessarily the lack of offensive talent. It's just that lack of just a huge booming bat, a huge boomer pitch crusher in the corners, I think. Because you have a lot of guys in the 90s or 100, then they can play third base, some play second, some play center, and that's really, really valuable. But you don't have like that one or two 120, 130 guys in a corner who can play respectable defense. I guess we can just call it the Anthony Santander trope. He's a guy who would look really good in Minnesota. He would look really good in Cleveland. He would look really good in really every well, 4 of the AL Central teams. I don't want to do that to him. I don't want to send him to Chicago. I liked him. I'm for Baltimore. I don't want to make him play for Jerry Reinsdorf and the White Sox this year because it's going to be a very, very depressing situation. But that's the kind of guy that the Twins are missing. And I think that's the kind of guy sometimes that some of the teams that are very careful spending sometimes miss out on, because a lot of these guys who do that aren't really the most dynamic players. No one looked at Anthony Santander and said, oh, I wonder if he could play in the infield somewhere. It just wasn't really a thing. But that's the one element I think that the Twins would like. And if someone breaks out, they could have that guy, but we just don't know if they have that guy yet.
Zips likes the depth of the Twins pitching staff. It does say, I get a feeling that you are a little conservative on the ceiling for a player like Joe Ryan, maybe one like Bailey Ober. Should Twins fans temper their hopes that those 2 players in particular can reach a ceiling that Pablo Lopez has reached in past seasons?
I think when I talk about ceiling, I mean kind of when you talked about someone getting into the elite tier. Zip still thinks there's a chance that Pablo Lopez can develop into that elite tier. It's shrunk a little bit, but it just doesn't see that same volatility for Ober and Ryan on the upside. But they're both projected for ERAs under 4. Those are solid projections to hang on to, and it's a pretty good top 3.
And Zips really likes Zebby Matthews, does it not?
I used him as my yearly lecture about home run rate because what makes me mad, I hate home run rate for pitchers. For those who aren't aware, we have a version of FIP on Fangraphs called XFIP, which guesses what a player's FIP would be if they had a league average home runs allowed. Now that's kind of a really stupid idea, but it actually works because home runs allowed for pitchers is actually a very, very stupid stat. It jumps all over the place. Long term, you have to look at the hard hit data, the exit velocity data, home run data over years and years. And every year, some team picks up or starts using these guys who allowed 1 million home runs the year before, and people are surprised that they're not allowing home runs the next year. Corbin Burns was like that in 2019. Andrew Heaney, a couple years later, I had so many people angry at me and said, like, Andrew Heaney's not going to allow that many home runs next year. That's why the Dodgers got him, because I'm pretty sure they know that home runs allowed is sort of a stupid stat for pitchers. And no, he wasn't going to be, Frank Viola or something out of nowhere, but he had a good season. He had some value to the Dodgers, and they got him pretty cheaply. So some people will look at Zebby Matthews and see the home runs allowed in his brief debut and panic about that, but you shouldn't really panic about that. You should look at the other stuff, and there are reasons to like him, not just because Zebby is short for Zebulon, which I always love. I'm a fan of cool names, but even in the majors, while he was allowing those home runs, he still was striking out 10 guys a game. So even if he's allowing those home runs, he's still fooling batters, and that's the thing that's hard to fake. You can't fake fooling a batter.
Right. I want to circle back to the offense for just a second, because of that list of guys over 100, obviously there are some surprises. Alex Kirilloff, who had his untimely retirement. Luke Keeschel, who you guys are your numbers are really high on. Mickey Gasper, one of the few additions they've made, 110. Emmanuel Rodriguez, 108. Those guys all far from a guarantee, or in Kirilloff's case, a guarantee not to contribute. But some of the surprises, some of the ones that I really like, Peyton Eales, diminutive shortstop that spent the bulk of the year at St. Paul last year. We'll see what he looks like defensively or if he gets up here, but there's some people who really like him. Gasper stood out to me too. Not a lot of power, but good discipline. He's got that lovely 100-point difference in his zips between on base and batting average. And then one that I really thought was interesting, and this would put him, 6th on the team in position player WAR. Deshaun Kiersey Jr., who had a really nice coming out party at St. Paul last year, and you got him a little under league average bat, but 2 WAR, so defense obviously there. I think that one might stand out to me the most. Obviously, Eels and Gasper are interesting as well, but Deshaun Kiersey really, really stood out to me as like, I'm going to keep an eye on that guy.
Yeah, the defense is interesting. The way ZiPS does minor league defense is I have exact coordinate data for every ball hit in the minors, and I calculate every year a probabilistic measure of every ball hit in the play to, estimate. It's kind of sort of like what Sean Smith used to do with total zones some years ago. The same kind of thing. The data is actually a little better than that, a little worse than obviously zone rating or anything like that. I'd much prefer to have something like OAA for the minors from top to bottom. I could be a lot more accurate, but this method really liked Kiersey's defense. And the thing is, when you're projected as a +6 defensive player in center field, there's a lot of bad that defense can make up for. And that makes him interesting because it does provide a possibility that he gets time in center and Buxton maybe in a corner. I don't necessarily know if it'll really keep him more healthy, but there are options, and I tend to like the interesting option over what's done before. So when you talk about guys like Eels, I do think that if they excel in the high minors, that the Twins should push them. And I'm not just saying that because Eels' best comp is Calyx Crab, and I like that the whole marine seafood theme. Which I swear I did not.
I hadn't noticed that. That's hilarious.
Someone's ordering DoorDash from Jimmy's after this.
See, I like the weird things about statistics and comps too, not just like because I'm kind of a non-serious person. And sometimes comps come up cruel, sometimes they come up funny. I remember some years ago when Buxton was a prospect, and his top comp was Carlos Gomez, and some people were really mad at me about that. That their prospect was compared to Gomez, who did not work out in his first stop, at least.
Two of your comps that I found very amusing, or just kind of nice to think about. Ryan Jeffers, his second comp is Chris Hoyles, who's one of my favorite, secondary players of all time, or non-great players. I loved him with the Orioles and would always try and get him in fantasy. And Royce Lewis, his third comp is Travis Jackson, who played 100 years ago. And I thought that was funny that, you got Carlos Correa compares to Tulowitzki and Bogarts, and Jose Vidro is nice to see him too. And then you got to go back 100 years for Travis Jackson. I
love Chris Hoyles, obviously Orioles fan. And even at the time, it annoyed me so much because broadcasters would always be shocked. They didn't understand, like, why does he have 20 home runs but only 49 RBI? Why does he have 19 and 53? What's wrong there? It's like, can you put the pieces together? Can you guess why the guy hitting 20 home runs only has 40 some RBI? Could it be that you're hitting him in a position of the lineup where nobody is getting on base because he was a low batting average catcher and they thought that's how offense worked? That your low batting average catcher hit 8th or 7th at best, but they never figured that out. And that annoyed me. He was a very underrated player. His time ended too soon.
Yeah.
Anyone who looks up his WAR will be surprised by just how good it came out. He had a 7 WAR season. Chris Hoyles did.
Wow. I love how you say you're an unserious person. I just added to my Twitter bio the other day. I'm a strange man who can't be taken seriously from 30 Rock. So what I want to ask you, my last question, on the Michael Scott Paper Company episode, he asks the accountant to crunch the numbers again, and obviously it didn't do anything.
It did a second time.
Was there a player where you're like, good grief, I got to crunch this again because this doesn't sound right to me?
On the Twins, I don't think there was. I'm just trying to think about I'd have to go through for the league as a whole. I don't actually know that off the top of my head who I checked. I did check Kristen Campbell of the Red Sox, which ZiPS really likes, just to make sure that ZiPS was projecting him as one of the best players on the Red Sox in 2025. I think the Twins didn't come out too surprising. Some of the offensive some of the lesser, I guess, the non-elite prospects that had good projections. I thought, oh, that's better than I thought, but no one I really considered, crunching the numbers again with. Normally when that happens, it's because I broke something. One year I crunched Jose Molina's projection, and I got a slugging percentage of 1900. I accidentally put a couple extra ones in his home run in one of his years. That's not right. He probably most of that kind of stuff at this point is an actual mistake that I've broken by being stupid. Now last year I noted actually 2023 now, so the year before, I did actually reproject the entire Arizona Diamondbacks team because ZiPS was projecting them to be a high 80s, near 90 win team going into 2023, and that was really not the general consensus about them. And I didn't see anything that was obviously wrong, but I just thought, hey, I got to dig through this and make sure this is right, because I don't want to look stupid because I was projecting them to go from like 74, 75 wins to 90 wins. But that one actually worked out. Some crazy projections don't work out. Ask me about my lasting millage projections some years ago. Ugh.
It wasn't lasting.
It was not. And I still get heat for the Gleyber Torres projection that had him as a top home run hitter. But I'll stand by that because the way he hit at a very young age, there was no reason to think at that point that he'd be just the guy he turned out to be. I mean, he hit 38 home runs at 22.
Right. There was one other thing not about the Twins, but team in their division, the Guardians. What impact do you think the recent moves, the big moves that they made, notably Naylor and Jimenez not being on the team anymore, has to do with how ZiPS projects them in 2025?
It actually affects it quite a bit. ZiPS does not like Carlos Santana going into the season. I mean, he's going to be 30. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's going to be 39, and yeah, he played really well last year, but he had like a WRC plus of 97 for the previous 4 years. ZiPS has been a fan of Jimenez, thought that he was a good bounce back candidate, and felt this was kind of selling him low. Yeah, he probably wasn't going to have an mid 800s OPS again, but his defense is plus enough that he has a 720, 730 OPS. He's a really valuable player. And I think the Guardians are kind of in a similar position to the Twins in that they have the future Hall of Famer who is still really good in Jose Ramirez. They have the outfielder who's the plus outfielder who can go to an all-star game in any given year, and Stephen Kwan, Byron Buxton, and then a lot of kind of 1.5 to 2 WAR guys. I thought that Naylor, yeah, I understand why they did it. They see him approaching free agency, but I think the team is worse without him and Jimenez.
And their bullpen, did it overachieve a little bit last year? I mean, we were
regress any day, Dave. Let's go.
Oh my God!
ZiPS actually loves the Guardians bullpen. Yeah. I have them like a couple runs over a season behind the Twins based on the current innings pitch projection. Behind. Yeah. The Twins have the slight edge. I even talk about because they're actually the team that goes tomorrow. Conveniently, and the difference was literally if Ryan Webb picked fewer innings, then Cleveland would have the better projection. But the Guardians right now have the best relief projection, at least in ZiPS. I'm trying to remember if we have it on our depth charts right now. I think the Twins are number one still.
Pretty good.
Because Steamer doesn't like the Guardians bullpen as much.
Darn.
I was just kind of waiting for them to tire out. I thought.
Well, they did just a little.
I mean, yeah, before the end of the regular season. Yes, I guess they did.
Now. So they're pretty well rested right now, though.
Yes, they are. All right, we've had fun with Dan Szymborski of Fangraphs and ESPN, and the creator and developer of ZiPS. And Dan, we thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Locked On Twins, and maybe we'll have you back someday again. And we appreciate you getting us close to spring training here with your projections.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I mean, I go way back with both of you at this point.
Yes.
I never did get to say why Dan hates your team.
Oh, well, I think it was all implied, but
Okay. I mean, I want to emphasize to people that their personal failings in life might be why I hate their team, or they're just Yankees fans.
Perfectly.
There you go. On that note, that was what were you going to say something else, Brandon?
No, I said that's perfectly fair from my viewpoint.
All right. So for Dan Szymborski and Brandon Warren, this is Dave Brown wishing you all a very pleasant good evening and saying we're going to Alexei Casilla tomorrow night.